With that, Jess, are you ready for rapid fire?
Let's do it.
All right. Dane Brugler from The Athletic revisited his first-round NFL draft projections from a year ago recently. He rated Riley Leonard last year as his number 28 player for this past year's draft. That, of course, was prior to Riley Leonard's injury at Duke. So does that change the way you think or feel about either Leonard or Notre Dame going into this season?
No, I don't think it changes anything. I think that Riley Leonard is graded out as a first round guy as long as he's healthy. And I think that, in terms of how I feel about Notre Dame going into this season, I think that it makes me feel better about Notre Dame because I would say that Riley Leonard is further along in his development as a professional quarterback than what Sam Hartman was a year ago at this time. And so, again, as long as he can stay healthy, that's really the only concern because I think he's going to play better football than what Sam Hartman did. And I think that brings more potential to Notre Dame. So that makes me feel better about Notre Dame.
Yeah, it does not change the way I feel. Really, it only reinforces the way I feel because I've been pretty consistent with the fact that I'm pretty high on Riley Leonard and his potential for this season. But, in terms of, I think there is, a chance of at least being a Heisman finalist. And I do think that there's a really good chance that he ends up being the missing piece with the kind of play that he can give Notre Dame that can be the kind of playmaker, to score some points against Ohio State, score some points against Clemson and Louisville and whoever it happens to be. Florida State, obviously, this year. Clemson, my reference was to last year that they didn't score enough points. But I think that he can be much more consistent with what he brings them. So, again, it doesn't change it. I think that Notre Dame is going to be competing for a college football playoff spot, and I think that he is going to be the catalyst of that and really seeing this, that Brugler did have him projected as a first-round talent a year ago. Again, it only reinforces that for me, that Riley Leonard can be that guy, assuming he's fully healthy. With 86 days to go until the start of Notre Dame's season, what is the one thing you're willing to guarantee about the Irish this fall?
86 days away, and the one thing that I'm willing to guarantee about Notre Dame this season is that they're going to have a more explosive, more talented, and playoff contending offense this season. An offense that is actually going to be a difference maker and not something that's kind of chasing behind, trying to make up and catch up with the talent on the defense. I believe that with 86 days left until the season, this is one of the most balanced Notre Dame teams that we have seen in a while in terms of the defense and offense, both being really, really elite and both being almost, the defense is definitely national championship level to me. And I think the offense is going to get to that level as well.
I'm glad that you made your guarantee about the offense because I'm willing to guarantee that Notre Dame is going to have a stingy, nasty defense that takes the field this season. And we've had a lot of questions come in about, are they going to hold them to this many points and, all this different stuff. I do think you brought up a good point. There were times last year where Notre Dame ended up being maybe turnover dependent sometimes, and that is hard to replicate sometimes because turnovers can be so random. But you look at the schedule that they're going to play, where they play the games, all that stuff. I'm very confident that this is going to be maybe the best defense that we've seen in the last 30 years at Notre Dame. It's going to be very good. Fill in the blank. It's blank that Notre Dame great Zack Martin says his 11th season in the NFL, this upcoming season with the Dallas Cowboys, could be his last.
Is bittersweet. Watching Zack Martin at Notre Dame, and then obviously watching him being drafted by the Cowboys over Johnny Manziel and that whole saga that came to be, him spending his entire career as a Dallas Cowboy, it's bittersweet. We're talking about one of the best offensive linemen in the entire game, a guy who is for sure going to be in the Hall of Fame. the guy has like more pancakes than penalties, right? Like he's phenomenal. And anytime there's a big run on the edge, it's probably because Zack Martin is pulling around the corner and obliterating, some sort of linebacker, safety, or corner. So, it's bittersweet on both ends. It's a great Notre Dame legend, and he's going to go down as a Cowboy legend as well.
Well, you're right. He's going to go down as one of the best in the game. And like we were talking about, the unfortunate passing of Larry Allen earlier this week, I think that there's a case for Zack Martin as probably one of the 3, maybe even 2 best guards in franchise history for the Cowboys. Allen would be number 1. Nate Newton is up there. Zack Martin is right there as well. What's crazy is Zack Martin has been in the league for 10 years now. He's been first team All-Pro 7 times. He's been second team All-Pro twice. The only time that he didn't make either first or second team All-Pro was when he was injured. He had an injury season, so he didn't make it that year. Otherwise, he's been either first team or second team All-Pro every year. He's a lock for the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and he's going to go down as one of the greats. And it's just unfortunate because in all likelihood, Jesse, he's also going to end his career without ever winning a championship if he does decide to ultimately hang it up after this upcoming season. Are you still there?
I'm back.
Okay. I was just saying the unfortunate thing is if he does hang it up after this season, he's probably going to go down, as one of the best Cowboys to ever play without winning a championship.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, I just had to literally sprint all the way up and down the stairs real quick. So I forgot that someone was coming by, and I didn't leave the door unlocked. So
oh boy,
had to get a quick sprint in. But I think the thing that would be the most disappointing is the wasted talent between Zack Martin, Tyron Smith, and Travis Frederick when he was still healthy, because it was one of the best offensive lines in the entire football, right? And so I think the sad side of this is you waste 11 years of one of the best offensive linemen to do it.
Yeah. But, I mean, Zack Martin has been the best guard in the game in the 10 years that he has been in the NFL. And, I realize, again, that, people still want to talk about Quentin Nelson. And Quentin Nelson is great, but, he doesn't have the longevity of Zack Martin. And 2, his play has dropped off a little bit the last couple of years. Zack Martin has been the epitome of consistency over the decade he's been in the NFL, decade of greatness. And,
I need everyone to leave me alone. I literally sprinted. You know how steep and high my stairs are. Like
yes, I do.
I mean, I was quick,
You're
right?
Glistening. You're glistening though right now.
I sprinted. I don't have AC in this house.
All right, Jess, we got the release of the college football playoff games, the locations, TV assignments. The first 4 games are going to be on campus home sites, of course. December 20th, that's a Friday, will be the first game at 8 o'clock that night. The 21st, a Saturday, games at noon, 4 and 8 o'clock Eastern time. 2 of the games will be on ESPN/ABC, 2 of them on TNT. Then they'll go to neutral sites for the quarterfinals. The Fiesta Bowl, Tuesday, December 31st, the Peach Bowl, the Rose Bowl, and the Sugar Bowl on New Year's Day will all be quarterfinal sites. The semifinals, January 9th and 10th at the Orange Bowl and the Cotton Bowl, and then the national championship game January 20th in Atlanta. So I guess, we pretty much knew the dates before, but at least now I guess we sort of, like where the games are going to be played and all that stuff, so people can kind of, start looking at potential destinations and all those kind of things. So NBC and Notre Dame released kickoff times and TV assignments last week for Notre Dame's home games in the Shamrock Series game against Army. 6 of those 7 games are going to be broadcast on NBC and simulcast on the Peacock streaming service. to me, Jesse, this is a huge opportunity that's being missed by not just simulcasting the exact same broadcast on both NBC and Peacock, but instead doing an alternate broadcast, a la, like a Manning cast kind of thing. So, first question, do you buy or sell Notre Dame doing an alternate broadcast on Peacock rather than just a straight up simulcast?
Yeah, I would be, if we were in and out on this, I would have to say that we would be in on an alternate broadcast. And I think it's a huge blown opportunity because I think you could easily bring Brady Quinn in and you could pair him with, and Brady Quinn's just the first example, but you could pick any sort of great Notre Dame player of the past who still has enthusiasm about the game, who's still plugged in about the game, and allow them to just kind of nerd out, right? Like give you some of that deeper X and O stuff that you would miss, on your general regular NBC broadcasts.
Yeah, it's, of course you go straight to Brady Quinn because everybody goes straight to Brady Quinn right away.
I know he's got the deal with Fox, so like it wouldn't happen, right? But like that's just, again, that's my, like, okay, maybe Rocket Ismail could come on and do something with someone, right? Like someone of nostalgic past that still, again, has the knowledge to talk about the game at a deeper level.
Right. I mean, look, the majority of the audience for a Notre Dame home football game is what? Notre Dame football fans, right? But NBC has continued to neglect that fan base because they've never put anyone who's Notre Dame, a former Notre Dame player, in that booth. And that's what people want. And to an extent, I understand what NBC is doing. They don't want any, hints of favoritism or, bias and that kind of stuff. But, again, if the majority of your viewing audience is Notre Dame, they're automatically going to assume bias from a lot of the other peoples who have ended up in the booth, whether it's Doug Flutie or Pat Hayden. I had a hard time for a second to remember his name. It's been a few years, from Notre Dame rivals who have been in there. And I just think that an alternate broadcast would solve this problem. Would there be a little extra expense involved? Well, sure, there'd be a little extra expense. But if you're willing to spend $50 million a year, for Notre Dame to have the rights to carry the game, what's an extra million or two, to go out and put a different set of people and cater to your Notre Dame fan base, the biggest part of your viewing audience on the Peacock, on the streamer? That I think would actually give people a reason to go over there and find that streamer. You might actually get a lot more people going to Peacock if you actually catered to the fan base who most watches your games on a week in, week out basis.
Yeah, you have to, because at that point, you want to feel like as a consumer, okay, if I have to go out and get this additional service, what additional service am I getting, right? Like what is the difference between this and what could have just been done on NBC? So I feel like as hardcore fans, we want something, basically added or a bonus for having to go out, sign up for Peacock, literally just for one or two games throughout the duration of the season, right? Yeah. So there's got to be some sort of added bonus to make you feel good about the situation rather than making it feel like it's just a hassle for everyone.
Stymie says Montana drinking Guinness and calling the game. Now that would actually be like Notre Dame fans would eat that up, right? You'd love it. And then Josh Boffo, this is exactly what I'm talking about. NBC actually puts people in the booth who hate Notre Dame, in his opinion. And now whether or not that is true,
hates Notre Dame.
But still, that's I think the sentiment from probably at least 50% of the diehards who watch those games, that NBC is putting people in there who actively don't like Notre Dame because of the fact that you don't have anybody from Notre Dame in that booth. So it's like, where are we right now? Like if ESPN on Monday Night Football can have Joe Buck and Troy Aikman in the main booth on Monday Night Football on ESPN, and the Manning cast on ESPN2, it's all viewership, right? And again, if you're doing this on Peacock, you're giving people an actual reason to go over to Peacock and not just having it there. Like what?
Right.
Like if NBC is over the air, so theoretically anyone in the country with a pair of rabbit ears can go out and find the game. Now, I guess it's a little more detailed than rabbit ears these days because of, flat screens and technology, but you would actually give people a reason to go to Peacock and subscribe to the streamer if you did something like this. So I guess, again, my question is, would you cater to the hardcore football fan or the hardcore Notre Dame fan in an alternate broadcast like this?
The hardcore Notre Dame fan. I think you have to, because that's going to be I mean, let's be realistic about this. You're not buying that Peacock subscription unless you're a fan, right? A hardcore Notre Dame fan. Like a casual college football fan isn't signing up for Peacock because they want to watch the random Notre Dame game on Saturday, right? So I would be willing to say that 90% of the people that sign up that day are hardcore Notre Dame fans. So I think that's who you have to cater to, not the hardcore football fan, the hardcore Notre Dame fan.
Yeah.
Because again, you're only making Notre Dame fans do this to go watch their team on Peacock. And so I think, again, you have to do something to reward the hardcore Notre Dame fans.
I completely agree. Again, because they comprise the highest percentage of your audience. Like, especially like in a season where you've got home games against Northern Illinois and Miami, Ohio, and on down the line, you absolutely like cater to the Notre Dame fans. Again, that's why I think this would be such a good idea. You can have your traditional main broadcast over here on the main network for the masses, and that's obviously going to play, the way you want it to play for the bigger games, for like Ohio State last year and Florida State and whoever it happens to be, the games that end up in primetime. That's you want that down the middle type broadcast crew because you're going to get a bigger audience there, but you still would have a good chance of, okay, the diehard Notre Dame fan, go straight over to Peacock and you can get your fill of not completely, just over the top homers necessarily, but you can get a broadcast that is more specific to being a Notre Dame fan, a different kind of experience that I think that you could have over there. You're really big on the Manning cast for Monday Night Football. And that, of course, again, that's like the premier alternate broadcast. And to be honest, there have been a few alternate broadcasts here and there, like McAfee started doing some alternate broadcasts last year, not really on the style that they were going for on what McAfee did. I'm not saying that I'm completely out on McAfee, but that thing specifically, I wasn't a big fan of the way they did it. What do you love about the Manning cast on Monday Night Football?
So what I love about the Manning cast, first and foremost, is the regular broadcast is like a macro level, and the Manning cast is more of a micro level. If you truly appreciate the game and, outside of kind of the topical on the surface level stuff, then the Manning cast is for you, because the way that they are able to, it's kind of like not necessarily listening to Tony Romo during some of his games, but like the ability where Peyton and Eli literally pre-snap are just like, okay, this is what I see, this is what I would do. And then as the play goes on, they kind of, they're still breaking it down. I just feel like it's like me and my best friend sitting at home, chopping it up, talking about football, and having a good time, right? Like that's what it feels like. They're just hanging out, having a good time, and then you introduce these guests who are also, fans of football,
right?
And then you get them to relate, why is football impactful for you? What is, you know what I mean? Why do you enjoy football so much? What is your reasoning for being a big fan of this team, and whatever else. So like the combination of getting celebrities in there, the ability to break down the game at a high level but still make it simple for the viewer, that's ultimately what I like so much. And it's to me, there's no biasy in it as well. It's just pure football. They're just talking about what they're seeing and how they would go about it if they were quarterbacks.
And you might remember it was before they went to Peacock when NBC still had the NBC cable channel. Do you remember that? Mm-hmm. They tried like an alternate broadcast. I don't know if it was considered the alternate. Yeah, it was. It was an alternate broadcast. They had like, I remember who all was in there? Darius Walker was one of the former players that was in there. I think they had like Jessica Smetana, who used to work for Sports Illustrated, and I think she works for Levitard now in his podcast network. She's a Notre Dame alum, and they had some others in there, and it's not the path that I would go, because I didn't feel like you had the right level of people hosting that show. Again, like you said, Brady Quinn. I think it would still be pretty hard to get a Brady Quinn, but I think that there are some others who could drop in the booth. And I just feel like, like the Mannings are doing that, the Manning cast. One, it's not a full entire NFL season. Two, they get to do it from home. Like they get to sit at home and do it from their living room rather than going to a studio, which I think, is pretty attractive. And I think that because of that, because you have so many Notre Dame alums who are spread out around the country, I think if you found the right people, it would be very easy to emulate that kind of thing. And, like when you look at who you could get, again, like Brady Quinn is the big one. To me, it seems so simple because of like the format that you're talking about, where you've got a couple of guys talking. It doesn't have to be necessarily male, but like everyone's going to have their favorites. I've just said all along, go get the Golics. Like they've got talk show host experience. They are used to talking with people. They're very conversational with people. I mean, Mike Sr. obviously did it for more than 2 decades doing a morning radio show for ESPN, and Golic Jr., kind of came in at the tail end of that, and they've got their own show right now. So they obviously have great rapport. They would have great rapport with all of the Notre Dame alums who you would want to bring into this kind of thing as well. I just think that it makes too much sense. Like I feel like it would be very easy, especially with those two, because you've got Peyton Manning, Eli Manning. You'd have Mike Golic, Mike Golic, Jr., Senior. I feel like they could easily, emulate something like that. What do you think?
Yeah, I do think that they could emulate something like that. I just don't know who I would pick to do that, right? But to me, I feel like it's you would want someone that's at least an ex-player or played at the NFL level, right? Because that's the kind of in-depth knowledge that I'm looking for if I'm going to watch, an alternate cast, essentially, is something that differentiates or something that's going to draw me there, because I can easily just watch, the main broadcast that everyone else is doing, right? But I think you have to, if you're going to do it, I think obviously the most important part is who's going to do it, not necessarily the format, but people who are, one, interesting enough, two, know enough about the game, and three, have the ability to be comical at the end of the day. And that's
why I think the Golics make the most sense. That's a big part of why I think the Golics make the most sense. And again, I realize it would never be unanimous. Like no one's going to unanimous. There's not going to be unanimous approval rating. I'm sure that there are people who hate the Mannings and won't watch the Manning cast because they don't, like most of them are probably Patriots fans or Cowboys fans or whoever they happen to be. And like Clontarf says, no thanks, get BQ. Brady Quinn, of course, is who he's talking about. And I mean, again, Brady Quinn is who everyone wants. I because of just the nature of his job. I mean, he gets to do a studio show. He gets to call games. He's got a radio show, all with Fox. And I think that is still, it is still probably pie in the sky for something like that. It would be perfect if they could swing it, but I just don't know that is going to, ever be anything more than a pipe dream, basically. So Andrew says, probably need one Notre Dame guy and one Big Ten guy. NBC has the Big Ten in a spot. Notre Dame is the warm-up act, unfortunately. But again, that's on NBC. We're talking about you're still going to have your main broadcast on NBC, but on Peacock, the streamer, where you can have multiple games going on at the same time, and the Big Ten does have, I believe, multiple games going on at the same time on Peacock. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, you can have whoever you want in there, because it's not necessarily the warm-up act. On Peacock, it would be the act, basically. You're not necessarily leading into something else on Peacock because the way you have to switch around. And, America's Truth broker says he thought Notre Dame should have went in another direction with the TV deal because NBC doesn't care enough to put together a strong presentation for Notre Dame games anymore. And this is, again, this is how a lot of Notre Dame, this is a pretty large sentiment for Notre Dame fans, the way they feel about the NBC broadcast. That's why I'm saying you've got NBC and Peacock. Why just simulcast the exact same broadcast on
right.
both channels? Use the streamer where there's a smaller audience anyway, and you're trying to grow it, and you're trying to get people to pay subscriptions. Do you think that hardcore Notre Dame fans wouldn't pay the Peacock subscription to watch a very Notre Dame focused alternate broadcast over there? I have to think they would.
I would.
Yeah.
Especially if it's
you're the audience.
And these people, in the chat are talking about, this is who I'd go with, or this is, and I guarantee if they picked someone Notre Dame, again, someone nostalgic, someone that brings back, the good old days and was a lovable player and an elite player at Notre Dame, and no one's going to say no to that. No one's going to say no to that.
Yeah. That's exactly right. Now, you'd have to pay Brady Quinn quite a bit to get him to do this. One, because it's a streamer, and two, because he's making a lot of pretty good money at Fox. But look, if you don't want to pay somebody else to do it, the most inexpensive solution to this, what have a lot of people said over the last couple of years? Put the radio guys, put Paul Burmeister and Ryan Harris on NBC. Just do what Apple TV is doing with these Friday night Major League Baseball games and give people the option on your remote control on the Peacock stream to switch over to the Notre Dame radio broadcast. For the Peacock broadcast, you've got Notre Dame, then you've got a Notre Dame broadcast right there, and it wouldn't cost you anything other, maybe a couple $1,000 to figure out the technology to be able to put that switch in place. Allow people to use the radio call instead of the TV call on the Peacock stream. And I think that to me, that's still a great solution. What do you think?
Yeah, I do. I do think that's a good solution as well.
So they're going to do, of course, this behind the scenes Hard Knocks style, show this season. If you had to pick one or the other, would you pick the Hard Knocks show or would you take the alternate broadcast?
Do you know how long or how many episodes they plan to release?
It's going to be a weekly show, but I haven't seen if that necessarily means it's going to be every week or if they'll take any weeks off or anything like that. So let's just assume 12 shows.
Oh, I would take the Hard Knocks style show because I think you would be able to learn more and again get more out of that essentially. So that as a hardcore fan, I think you would get more out of seeing stuff behind the scenes on the Hard Knocks than you would out of an alternate broadcast. So that's why I'd have to pick the Hard Knocks show. Yeah,
for me, if I was sitting home watching the games, I think I might take the alternate broadcast. But for me, doing shows every day during the week and looking for extra content, I'm going to get more content out of the Hard Knocks show. So I'm going to go with the Hard Knocks show for sure. So that's the direction that I would go as well. Interesting. I'll be curious to see if they ever do anything with it. Nothing is obviously going to happen this year. But with all the technology and the fact that you've got a blueprint out there with the Manning cast for an alternate broadcast, because it all counts as viewers the same, whether it's on NBC or Peacock. I mean, that's why they're doing it, right? And I saw Sloppy Joe saying earlier he doesn't have the antenna. He watches everything on Peacock. It just seems too simple to me. There's been a lot of Notre Dame fans over the years unhappy with the presentation that they get on the broadcast NBC network, and it seems like it would be a very unique way to present Notre Dame football if you did an alternate broadcast on Peacock. Fill in the blank, Jesse. It's blank that the Los Angeles Lakers have their sights set on UConn's Dan Hurley to be their next head coach.
It's very, very, very intriguing that 2 days ago it was JJ Redick. And now
last night it was JJ Redick. I went
Right.
to bed, it was JJ Redick. I woke up, it's Dan Hurley.
and what makes it intriguing is exactly kind of what I think if you go with JJ Redick, you're playing with one roster, and if you go with Dan Hurley, you're playing with a different roster. And I think that roster does not include LeBron James. And I think also what this is,
Really? You think the Dan Hurley roster does not include LeBron James?
Which is why I think this is intriguing, because I think this will have a ripple effect not only on the roster, but the organization as well, just because of how this thing is run. You got Jeannie Buss at the top. She's just kind of the face of the operation, right? Like Rob Pelinka really is the guy who runs the whole thing. So, the Lakers since 2010 have had, I think, 7 different coaches. So we're talking about basically a new head coach every 2 years. And I think Dan Hurley is a specific type of coach where if you bring him in, he's not here for 2 years. He's at least here for 4 or 5 years, right? And so that when you start talking about the hierarchy of, you're giving Dan Hurley control. It's no longer, the organization is making a lot of decisions.
Well,
you're giving the reins largely to Hurley, and he's going to be here at least for 3 or 4 seasons. So that's why it's intriguing to me, because I think that dynamic shift based on what type of coach you go with. And there's a big difference between JJ Redick and Dan Hurley.
Well, I mean, huge. One is experience. JJ Redick played in the NBA, obviously, but he has not coached in the NBA. The biggest draw to him is he is LeBron James's podcast co-host. And I mean, you're like most of your focus is on the LA Lakers side of this, which I find interesting, because what makes, like, Dan Hurley obviously has a ton of success. He's just won 2 national championships. And like for him, going from Storrs, Connecticut to Los Angeles, I mean, you talk about culture shock just right there and the difference. But coaching college athletes compared to pro athletes, Andrew says that it's Rick Pitino all over again, because dudes making $50 million a year don't want to be treated like college basketball players. That's why I wonder, because as good a basketball coach as Dan Hurley is, and a lot of the talk on ESPN and the different shows today has been, like the Lakers want a system. They want to put a system in place, and
Correct.
Dan Hurley gives you a system. But there's still a difference between a college developmental system and an NBA system, especially if LeBron would be involved or any veteran is involved. But like Dan Hurley is a very intense coach, and that's my biggest question, and I haven't heard it brought up very much today in any of these other shows, is the intensity that Dan Hurley has. Does that play, especially with a veteran NBA roster? What do you think about it from that aspect?
I see what you're saying because of the developmental piece, and by the time you're in the NBA, it's no longer developed. You're playing with what you got, right? Like that's kind of the whole situation. So that's why I believe ultimately that the roster would kind of go through like a morph, right? Because I think you'd have to have a certain type of player that's going to be willing to kind of play under that style of Hurley, right? And I get it at some point, not everyone's going to be on board, right? And they're professionals. They're going to kind of have to adapt at the end of the day. But I just, it's hard to think about because of, what you're bringing up of, there's a big difference between a college roster and an NBA roster and how you coach those type of rosters. And you know what I mean? Like seeing Dan Hurley in some of these games as a college coach, just some of that stuff wouldn't fly in the NBA, right? Like he's yelling at his guys when they're up 25. Like you're not doing that in an NBA game.
Well, and especially because you're talking about almost 3 times as many games. And if you get to the playoffs, it is going to be about 3 times as many games as what you're playing in college. And that only goes so far. Like Pitino was brought up, and there have been plenty of other coaches who've got that college style who've tried to do it in the NBA, and especially today. Like you look at most, like when they bring those cameras into the huddle on a sideline in the NBA, there's not very much excitement coming out of the coach. It is all very matter of fact. It is, just very, direct, but matter of fact and very chill, basically. You don't see these intense coaches in these huddles barking at guys. It is all just very calm. Okay, you're going to do this. You're going to do this. If this happens, it's like that's what you see now. It's completely different than the Dan Hurley style.
Michael's saying LeBron and AD have input on the next head coach for the Lakers. I just disagree.
But that's assuming that LeBron James is staying around.
And that's what I mean. I think that's ultimately, LeBron James is he's going to be 40 here soon, right? Like, I don't think the Lakers care about LeBron James in the next 4 years more so than they care about the health of their entire organization over the next 4 years, because LeBron James is just about ready to ride off into the sunset. He just needs to play with his son, right? Like, that's all that's going to happen. And so, like, that's what I'm saying. If Pelinka decides to go with Hurley, I think that's the clear sign that they're moving away from LeBron. So they don't need LeBron's approval. At the end of the day, I think what's going to happen is what they decide is ultimately going to deter what LeBron James does in his last 2 to 3 years of his career.
Yeah. So do you think Hurley has a better chance to win a championship next year with the Lakers, or if he stays at UConn?
UConn.
Really?
100%.
That quick, huh?
Lakers are outside of Anthony Davis and Austin Reeves, their roster is in not good shape.
But if he's as good a coach as they think he is, and they bring him in, and LeBron,
yeah, but
around,
this. The NBA is a hard league, whether or not people want to openly admit it, compared to college. Like, we watched Luka Doncic pull up from the logo and just keep hitting and hitting. As an NBA coach, what are you doing to stop that? You're not coming up with some crazy new scheme to stop that. It's just one of the best shooters in the world, right? And so that's I don't know. I
think the odds are pretty long at both, but I also think the odds of winning a third straight national championship in college are even longer than if he were to go to LA and be with the Lakers, because maybe,
this is the first thing that Brent and I think have agreed on ever on this show.
LeBron and Davis are too old, injury prone, and lack depth. I do agree with that. Don't disagree with that at all. But, like John B is saying, doesn't translate. You aren't motivating NBA players who don't already have that internally.
Right. You either want to be great or not at that level.
Yeah. So speaking of championships, it's blank that Colorado has the fourth most bets placed on them at BetMGM to win the college football playoff this year.
It's wishful thinking. Colorado won't come close to the national championship, and I wish those people would just donate their money to me because I could use it more wisely.
I think this has something to do with it. Colorado had started off with plus 20,000 odds to win it. So obviously, you make even, what, you bet $1, that's 20,000 if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So you stand to win a lot if Colorado does win. There's nothing to lose for a relatively small wager. It's gone to plus 12,500, which is still pretty good. But it's very wishful thinking. But I think that's why the money has gone to Colorado, because I think that they're going to struggle to even be a 500 team this year. But because of the fact that they had such good odds to win a national, or the odds are in your favor. I think that's what's drawn most of the money on this thing. You've got all these closet Dion fans floating around out there. So the NBA finals do start tonight. How would you wager, Jess, if you're going to drop a wager or two on the NBA finals? Do you bet the entire series? Do you go, like one team for like game to game? How you've got to have something going. What's your strategy for betting on the finals?
Surprisingly, I don't have anything going quite
Really?
yet. My expenses have been tight the last few months. I've been on a little bit of a cold streak betting wise, so just got to zip it up a little bit, let the money kind of average out, and then we'll start some bets up again. But I think that the way I would do it is I would do just series winner, and I would take the Mavs to win the whole thing. And I think if you want to get fun, you could do Mavs. You could predict the series and do Mavs in 6 or Mavs in 7. And I think that would ultimately, because I think the Mavs win, and I don't think they're doing it in 5. And so again, if you did them in 6 or 7, like if you did 2 bets, because you get even higher odds on that, because you're only predicting the winner, you're predicting how many games it would take as well. That's the kind of route that I would look.
Interesting.
To get some extra juice, right? Because again, this thing is going more than 5 games. And so you could even take the Celtics in 6 or 7 if you want. But instead of just taking straight up, I think you get more juice by picking, either game 6 or game 7.
Yeah. So do you actually like the Mavs to win the series?
Yes.
Really?
I think they're the hottest team with the hottest player.
Yeah. I mean, they both had to sit for a little while. The Celtics have obviously had to sit for a few days longer. Like, is that factoring into your decision at all?
I just think when it comes down to it, Kyrie Irving is more clutch than Jaylen Brown. He's actually won a championship and been, he hit the shot to seal the championship for that LeBron and Kyrie and Kevin Love Cavs team against the Warriors. And I just think straight up, Luka Doncic is a better player than Jason Tatum. And so when you combine those two together and how hot the Mavs are, I think they have a better chance. And I think, I don't know if you've seen any of the questions throughout the week, but, Luka's had some lingering injury issues. And they were like, oh, does the time off help you? He goes, no, it still hurts. I just play at this point. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then another funny video I saw, I don't know if you saw this one, but after they won the Western Conference Finals, there was a video of Luka standing next to his dad and he's drinking a beer, kind of celebrating in his uniform. And I don't know who it was, but they were part of maybe the GM. But he walks up and he literally takes the beer out of Luka's hand. He's like, no, not yet. So there must be some sort of agreement, because I mean, that's the kind of the running joke between, like Luka and Jokic and these European players is, yes, they're really good, but at the end of the day, they're still kind of, you know what I mean? Like it's not everything to them. They just, they're there to not have a good time, but like, they're still there to, have a few beers if they want them.
All right. Good stuff. We'll see how it goes. Game one tonight. All right. That's going to do it. Jesse's got to get rolling, so we're going to roll on out of here as well. Vince and I will be back tomorrow, because I don't think you're here tomorrow, right?
No, I'm not here tomorrow.
Okay.
Next Friday I am.
That's right. All right. Hit the like button. Subscribe on your Apple Podcasts. Give us a rating as well if you don't mind. And good stuff. Jesse, thanks everybody for being here tonight, and we will talk to you tomorrow on IB Nation Sports Talk.